Central Vietnam was struck by one of the most powerful storms in Asia this year. On the evening of November 6th, Typhoon Kalmaegi made landfall after re-intensifying over the South China Sea. The storm arrived with sustained winds near 150 kilometers per hour and torrential rain hitting provinces already submerged by a week of historic flooding. Meteorologists called it an abnormal and life-threatening event. Within hours, the system swept inland through Quang Nai Gia, Lai Dak Lak, and Bin Din. Coastal towns faced waves climbing 8 meters high while storm surges pushed seawater deep into streets and neighborhoods. Power poles snapped under the pressure of the wind. Entire blocks lost roofs as corrugated metal sheets flew through the air like shrapnel. Residents described the moment as deafening, the sound of wind and water merging into a single roar that did not stop through the night. The storm's outer bands delivered relentless rainfall. Meteorologists recorded between 200 and 600 millimeters across the central region in less than a day. In Quy Nhon, floodwaters rose waist-deep within hours. Major highways were cut off as rivers overflowed their banks. Roads that had only just reopened after the previous week's floods were swallowed again. Bridges collapsed and villages along low-lying plains became islands surrounded by muddy water. By Thursday evening, the government had already executed one of the largest emergency evacuations in recent memory. More than 350,000 people were moved from coastal and mountain areas to higher ground. Schools, public halls, and community centers turned into temporary shelters. Families carried blankets, rice, and bottled water as they waded through knee-deep water under the guidance of soldiers. Military trucks and high-water vehicles operated non-stop, shuttling the elderly and children to safety. At night, shelter lights flickered as strong gusts battered the windows. Volunteers distributed instant noodles and warm drinks. Parents held their children close, listening to the wind rattle the roofs above. Outside, trees bent nearly horizontal and street signs tore free from their posts. In some areas, local radio stations continued broadcasting evacuation orders powered by generators when the main grid went down. Deputy Prime Minister Tran Hong Ha directed all provincial authorities to treat the situation with the highest level of urgency. Coastal activities were banned. Fishing ports were locked down. The National Guard and border forces deployed hundreds of personnel to reinforce flood barriers and conduct rescue missions. Police blocked access to inundated highways, while search teams patrolled by boat in the dark. The National Center for Hydrometeorological Forecasting maintained continuous alerts throughout the night. Hydropower reservoirs were ordered to lower water levels to prevent dam failures. Engineers at major dams such as Song Train and Dak Drin worked around the clock monitoring pressure gauges and adjusting spillways as rainfall intensified. Air travel was also paralyzed. 6 airports across the central region suspended all operations from Thursday afternoon until Friday morning, grounding more than 100 flights. The closure left thousands of travelers stranded in terminal buildings while winds howled outside. By dawn, Kalmaegi had moved deeper inland but continued to unleash destruction. Streets in Gia Lai were covered with uprooted trees. Roofless houses stood in rows along the highway. In Dak Lak, entire power grids collapsed as transmission towers fell. Communication lines were disrupted, and emergency crews relied on satellite radios to coordinate responses. In the ancient town of Hoi An, floodwaters once again invaded the UNESCO-listed quarter. Boats drifted past the wooden facades of centuries-old houses that had barely dried from the last disaster. The Japanese-covered bridge was submerged to its arch, and cultural officials struggled to protect fragile timber structures from prolonged water exposure. Locals who had just reopened their shops earlier in the week packed their belongings and climbed to upper floors, resigned to another night above the flood. Further south, Ho Chi Minh City faced its own crisis. The storm's wide circulation combined with seasonal high tides on the Saigon River, producing dangerous urban flooding. Streets in low-lying districts filled rapidly with water as drainage systems failed to cope. The city's disaster office urged residents to avoid traveling through flooded underpasses and to stay indoors during the heaviest rain. The United States Consulate General in Ho Chi Minh City issued a weather alert for American citizens warning of hazardous travel conditions and possible transport disruptions. Local airlines canceled flights between the southern metropolis and the central region until further notice. Throughout the day, the government's Emergency Command Center in Hanoi coordinated relief operations nationwide. The Red Cross prepared food packages and medical kits. Military units pre-positioned boats and rescue gear in anticipation of continued flooding. Provincial officials held hourly briefings to update rainfall and river levels. In rural areas, farmers reported cattle swept away and crops destroyed. Rice paddies that had been ready for harvest were submerged. Landslides cut off several mountain villages in Quang Nam and Lam Dong provinces where the soil had been weakened by weeks of non-stop rain. Teams equipped with excavators worked to clear debris and reopen access routes for supply trucks. By evening, the rain showed little sign of stopping. Meteorologists predicted another 24 hours of heavy downpour with some places possibly exceeding 600 millimeters. The combination of saturated ground, overflowing rivers, and blocked drainage raised the threat of new flash floods and slope collapses. Power restoration teams began assessing damage, but many areas remained without electricity. Hospitals operated on backup generators. In evacuation centers, residents waited for updates unsure of when they could return home. The sound of helicopters occasionally broke through the storm as rescue units searched for isolated communities. As night fell again, the scale of destruction remained unclear. Reports of missing persons and collapsed houses continued to arrive from across the central provinces. Local television showed images of submerged vehicles and debris-covered streets. Emergency sirens echoed through towns as more areas were placed under high-risk alerts. Authorities warned that water levels in major rivers could keep rising through Friday morning. Residents were urged not to return until officials declared the areas safe. Relief hotlines were published on local broadcasts and social media channels connecting stranded families with rescue teams. For many along Vietnam's central coast, the passage of Typhoon Kalmaegi marked not just another storm, but the continuation of a relentless season of floods. Each new surge of water erased progress made from the last disaster. And as the storm's remnants drifted westward, the region faced a long and uncertain recovery. The full impact of Kalmaegi may take days to assess. What remains tonight is a coastline battered by wind and water, a network of communities cut off by flood, and a nation once again confronting the force of nature at its most unforgiving.
Ngã đâu. Rồi sao? Dớt.
Bình tĩnh đi, từ từ đợi người á.
Vâng, em có tiền không cho bảo. Mẹ.
Thấy không, phấn tàu vô nè. Wow. Để.